Hi, hello, and what is growing on, friends? Welcome to the first of what I hope to be a regular mini-series here on this channel, where I give you a taste of what my average week is like in our little intentionally agrarian apartment situation. Much of what we do right now, especially, is so contingent on the season, so I thought it would be fun to document these seasonal duties for this week. But I do also see this first video as a little sampling of some of my basic daily tasks. The big project going down at the Kitten House Ranch is an epic invasive mitigation. In layman's terms, we needed to systemically cut down and uproot a very knotty weed, also known as knotweed. If we did not take the time to do this, anything we do in this garden will be destroyed. I promise, it's true. We'll go into greater detail in an upcoming video, but just trust us, this is all totally necessary. This was thankfully the last week of digging, so trust that the majority of our time was spent out here doing a whole lot of this. Yes, that's a 3-foot hole. Yeah, I promise you, it's totally necessary. The process went like this. I broke up the ground with a pitchfork, pulled or dug out any large root structures, and then refilled the holes using a rake to catch any smaller bits of rhizome. Honestly, it's really hard work, but it's kind of mindful, not to mention one hell of a workout. It's important to take your time with projects like these too. I ended up finishing the square for the day, took a nice recovery bath with some Epsom salt, and rested the rest of the day. I woke up early the next morning to try my hand at dehydrating some oranges. I don't know. I was feeling inspired by some Scandinavian Yule inspo that popped up in my Pinterest feed. Part of why we got a place with a yard and why we're transforming it is to start a plant nursery, to do pop-ups at local green markets and such, maybe grow some specialty herbs and plants for local chefs and restaurants, and definitely doing our fair share of folk craft creation. Now, I don't think that I'm going to get it together enough to sell any of my handmade wreaths this winter, but I can try, can't I? Anyway, I busted out my fancy schmancy mandolin and gave that a shot, only to find out that the blade was far too dull to cut the citrus. And since filming this, I did give a second shot with a knife, like you can see me doing here. Although Muggsy reminded me on a separate day that a serrated knife would have worked a lot better. I'll be sure to film that attempt as well and report back. Once I was done with that, I sat down to start some Christmas crafting. I was hoping to get these little handmade Advent candles in the mail to arrive to my extended family in time for December 1st, but it was just going to cost too much. So I decided to just include them in my Christmas package for this year and just leave a note that they should be used for the following year. I suppose us Larsons can go without our Advent candles for one Yule, right? So once I finished that up, I headed outside for another day working on the yard. I needed to finish up my plot from the previous day by checking the edges of the square for any spots I might have missed, and then raking out and leveling the soil so no one's going to break an ankle out here. Then I popped some cardboard down for some preliminary weed barrier and ground it cover until we lay out the tarp, also to be explained in the upcoming knotweed mitigation video, so make sure you are subscribed and you have a notification on if you are a frequent YouTube viewer. Next, I needed to move my tiny greenhouse so I could get into the next area of the yard. Lots of shifting around with this project. I freed up the greenhouse frame and moved it over. I've been keeping a couple slates and stones inside the greenhouse to help retain heat. It's all really just an experiment. I'm just learning as I go. I have a few tropicals or more tender plants that are still thriving that I don't want to give up on just yet, so keeping them warm in the greenhouse. I'm also keeping my worm compost bin inside the greenhouse to generate heat as well. These are all tips that I found online. I will be sure to report back about what system works the best for optimizing these cheap little greenhouses. It was time for me to harvest the last of my little cherry tomato plant and retired it for the season. I'm planning to fill that little deck rail planter with some more kitchen herbs that would companion while grow with my scallions and oregano that are currently growing in there. After giving everyone a nice water, it was time to feed my worms. I was being pretty skimpy for a long time on the bedding, but it's really important to keep some dry material in the bin along with the soil and the compost. Once that was all done, I do my tidying. I always tidy along the way as I work. And now the real work begins. I set up my camera and start on the portion of the yard I just uncovered. Again, it's a marathon, not a sprint, so I probably only spent an hour, maybe an hour and a half out there working on this particular day. I didn't record much on Thanksgiving Day, but I wanted to take some time to document a traditional family recipe, my Gramps' glog. Once I came of a certain age, this was something my mother and I also did leading up to the solstice and Christmas, brewing it every night on the back burner of the stove. We like to use these camping coffee percolators, first on top so that we don't overbrew the ingredients on the first night or so. And then once it all starts to break down, you can drop it all into the pot without risk. First, I dropped in some orange peels, some clove, some allspice. I decided to toss in a couple bits of candied ginger since Mugsy had some from her mulling spices. I put in some cinnamon bark, and then for a little bit of extra oomph, I dropped in a packet of cider mulling spices into the pot, followed by some raisins, a half cup of port, a half cup of brandy, some chopped almonds, and then go ahead and pour wine over the whole thing. Brew it over low heat while you eat some pie. Simmer her every day after dinner while you chit-chat through the hygge season. Next day, I was back to work in the yard. I needed to finish the section I had worked on 2 days prior, and Mugsy was out there with me sorting all of our reclaimed building materials ahead of what we planned to be our last day of work on this phase of the project. As I said, much of the same this week. Lots of digging, preparing our plants for winter, but mostly some cozy, homey hygge vibes. It only seemed fitting to cap off the week then by shelling the dried beans of my last harvest from my old garden at my old place. Truly, I'm excited for what this new space and soon new Gregorian year shall bring, and I'm grateful to bring you all along with us. Cheers, and we'll chat again soon.